Okay everyone, I'm using a different camera, so hopefully this is going to work while I'm uploading the last video. So this time what I want to talk about is some of the products that potentially could be made industrially that could help this nation, okay? And one of them would be planes, boats, cars, construction equipment, building materials, you know, insulation, etc. Anything made of plastic. We all seen Henry Ford's plastic car from, you know, was that the 1940s or something like that, where it was lighter than steel, so you could have a smaller engine which was more fuel efficient because the engine was smaller and the weight of the car was smaller or lighter. Okay, we've seen prime example the wooden wonder, the Mosquito Bomber, twin engine bomber from World War II, British plane. It's got to be one of the most successful planes of World War II, if not the. It pulled off more daring raids, had longer range, less casualties than all of the other bomber commands and stuff together. It's such a multi-role. Okay, we know that there's planes like the old biplanes and things like that were made of canvas. There's other planes that were, a lot of planes that were made of wood back in the early days. Now, there's a vehicle there's a couple of vehicles that inspire me. One is the Schwim Wagon, a German World War II amphibious four-wheel drive small little car. Basically, it's like the Kumbel wagon. It's very similar to the Willys Jeep or any Jeep, but this one was an amphibious car. Unprepared, you could drive from four-wheel drive conditions, on-road conditions, straight into a river or a stream or any body of calm water, cross it, up the other side, and you keep driving. Okay, I see massive potential for a little vehicle like that. That vehicle had 25 horsepower, boxer engine, 4-speed manual, had reduction wheel hubs, and it was only 4-wheel drive in first and reverse. Okay, it weighed 910 kilos and had a top speed of, I don't know, was it 80 or something kilometers an hour with a 25 horsepower petrol engine. Okay, now and it was a bathtub design, so it was shaped kind of like a bathtub, all welded steel construction. Now, I can't help but think that a bathtub shaped constructed vehicle like that could not be molded extremely fastly and efficiently out of a fiber reinforced polymer or some type of plastic, hopefully being able to be devised from hemp or flax or any of the vegetable oils. We know that hemp fiber is extremely strong, so it's reinforced with that hemp fiber matting or something like that. Flax is just as good for the fiber. Now, I'm thinking, if you made something that, I'm going to put some photos of these vehicles that I'm talking. I might put a photo at the front, some photos in the middle, and some photos at the back. There'll also be I'll put all the photos together, so there'll be Schwim Wagon, a couple of planes. That's all I'll really concentrate on. Boats are self-explanatory. But the uses for such a vehicle. So I'm thinking that it's a small vehicle. So think along the lines of a Willys Jeep, a Suzuki Jimny, Suzuki Samurai for you guys in the States. We call them over here Suzuki Sierras. Little four-wheel drive vehicle. I'm thinking same sort of ground clearance, same sort of size as like a little Suzuki. It's made to carry 4 guys with a tiny bit of kit, 2 guys with a decent amount of kit. I think like a payload of something around 420 to 450 kilos would be optimum and perfect. With the weight of the vehicle, keep it very basic, so it's cheap to produce. We don't want radios in there, we don't want anything electrical. Keep it mechanically injected if possible. Keep the weight down to, I can't see why you couldn't make it so it's around half a ton, 500 kilos to 600-ish kilos. An engine of around somewhere between the 40 and 70 horsepower range. Fully amphibious, full four-wheel drive, and that's not a requirement, but make the base model. Later models could be 2-wheel drive only, but they're still made on the one chassis, so everything's just mass produced and it's cheap and easy. An engine of that's roughly somewhere between 650 to 900 cc's, somewhere in there. I'm sort of thinking around the 750 cc mark. Whether it's and run off biofuels. The car's made from bioplastics, runs on biofuels. So whether that's ethanol, gasoline sort of petrol sort of style engine, turbo, non-turbo, biodiesel. I think the biodiesel option would be fantastic. A little twin cylinder, 750cc turbo, biodiesel turbo. Potentially there could even be an option for a multi-fuel of biodiesel and ethanol. They both require compression, and if it was a turbo, surely you could just up the boost to create more compression for the diesel, lower the boost for less compression for the ethanol fuel. I don't see why that's a problem. Keep it all mechanical, because we want these to be emergency vehicles. Or the potential, the mainstay is for an emergency vehicle, whether that's Army, Air Force, Navy, Rural Fire, SES, State Emergency Service. I'll get to a volunteer service, what I touched on one of my earlier videos. Not a militia, not a state emergency service, not a rural fire, but something that you can learn multiple different skills and subsidized. A volunteer service, so we pay for our own kit, but it's made at a non-profit cost, extremely cheap. Okay, we're just after the bare basics, chassis and drive line. We just want a vehicle that works. Okay, if you want to put a stereo in it, you put a stereo in it yourself. If you want it to bling it up, you bling it up yourself, but absolutely as cheap as possible, so we can have as many people who would like to have it. That encourages manufacturing, engineering, builders. They need to build workshops and sheds and places to create it. It gives farmers jobs. It creates a biodiesel fuel industry. And then all the supporting things that come with it. And we can build them out in these areas where it's grown. In the areas where it's grown out here, that's where we set up these manufacturing facilities, so they're actually produced out here. Okay, now if you had a little vehicle, think along the lines of like a Polaris, a side-by-side, or a quad, those little 2 and 4 seater 4-wheel drive little off-road buggies, but slightly bigger, but fully amphibious, but can do 100 kilometers an hour, so you can safely drive on the road, maybe a little bit faster. 5-speed gearbox, bring it into the modern age, maybe a 6-speed if it's such a small engine. And you need if it's a small engine and you need the gear ratios there to do the off-roading, so be it. Maybe a 6-speed gearbox, an oversized motorcycle gearbox, you know, with towing capacity of the equal to the weight of the car or something along those lines. You know, imagine if you could have a really lightweight little car that you could put some decent off-road tyres on it. Maybe, you know, something along the lines of what a Jeep or a Suzuki would use on a Suzuki 4-wheel drive. Those sort of tyres. Low ground pressure, but you only weigh 600 kilos. And, you know, you got a very high power to weight ratio to begin with. Okay, it would get you just about nearly anywhere. We need decent ground clearance. Now, make it basic, but make it strong. Make the bottom end of the engine. The requirements would be a strong chassis, waterproof, so it's not going to fail when it goes into water. A strong bottom end, so then, and you got to make it look a little bit cool. I think the Schwim Wagon just hits the mark. It's got everything going for it. We just need a modernized version of it, and as cheap as possible. Okay, then imagine if you could get these things cheap as chips, and then all the hot rodders and the guys who like to modify things and engineers start messing with them, and then they're putting bigger turbos instead of running your standard, you know, 4, 6 or 9 pound boost. Then all of a sudden there's aftermarket and people were running 32 pound boost. You know, they start drag racing these things, they start dune racing these things, they start having races in the river systems and things like that. You know, all on environmentally sound, carbon neutral fuels and materials. You know, putting bigger turbos on there, supercharging them, do whatever. Let the aftermarket do that thing. It's like having an LS Chevy motor. You know, you looked at all the best parts that the Chevy and all the other V8s had, and then put it into the new motor, and then the hot rodders will go mental on it. Okay. The less moving parts are better. You know, can it be made? Can the biodiesel? Can it be made as a 2-stroke diesel, turbocharged 2-stroke diesel? So there's hardly any moving parts, no camshafts, no timing chains or anything like that. It's just extremely simple. If it wears out, oh well, we pull the head off, pull the barrels off, new rings, slap it back together, new gaskets, and away you go again, full boost. You know, I can see this being a very lightweight power to weight ratio off-road machine that can go just about anywhere, cross rivers without preparation. I think it's a win-win. Fishermen would love it, hunters would love it, you know, people who want to go into remote parts of Australia would love it, you know, forestry workers, national service, national parks and wildlife, rescuing people from floodwater, not raging torrents, but once the floodwaters come and it's just settled, then you could go around and either resupply people or whatever. You don't need boats and all this sort of stuff. You've just got one vehicle that doesn't cost much money and it can do lots of jobs. Okay, I think I'll make this video just about the Schwim Wagon vehicle itself, so we can spend more time on it. Now, as a military thing, we've seen how tough and how strong Henry Ford's hemp plastic was. Okay, so say the military had something like this, I don't see why it wouldn't be hard to have like an applique armor sort of thing that you could put on the outside. So maybe another hemp plastic / ceramic fiber reinforced mat on the outside. The hardened ceramic plating, that's the thing that breaks the projectile. Then it has to try and penetrate the hull, and then you could have a spore liner on the inside of it, all made of hemp. You know, and then there you go. You've got a vehicle that weighs fuck all. It's very small and compact. Can carry 2 guys and a lot of kit, or 4 guys with a little tiny bit, or tow the kit behind you. And if the trailers could float as well, boom, you're into a creek, you're into a lake or something like that, a dam, and then you across the other side, away you go. You know, how isn't that a military vehicle? How isn't that an emergency vehicle? You know, I think that's just common sense. You know, rural fire could use that to run pumps down to creeks, drive into creek systems or marshes and things like that, set up a pump in the most convenient spot, and then have, whether you've got a second one and you relay that pump to a reservoir and it powers another pump to get up over a hill or something like that to fight a fire, protect houses or businesses, or etc., etc. I think it's a no-brainer. And then you could have the industry modifiers, you know, and they can trick them up and make them all fancy, and you know, I just see it being a very easy thing to do when you look at what you can do with plastic these days, and investment casting and things like that. You know, having vacuum pumps and things like that. You can suck the plastic into all sorts of places that we could never do before. You know, and surely there's probably ways or types of plastic that you can plastic weld as well, so then you can add things to them, like roof racks and things like that. You know, you could have soft tops, hard tops. You know, you could sell, and why couldn't you sell the same thing, have them street registered and just sell them to the normal public, you know? And then, to tie that into what I was talking about, like a national volunteer service, right? We're giving guaranteed jobs to farmers to grow the crops, but then we're giving jobs to industry. People have got to design it and build it, etc., etc. But then where it sits in its final resting place in normal citizens' hands is, if they were cheap and readily available, and people were in a volunteer service, a rescue service, or you know, Minutemen, it's something that we can jump into our vehicle, and if there's bottlenecks on normal roads, and there's a river and you need to cross a bridge, the people who have got these things could just go down boat ramps or cross that river and get up the other side, and you're negating that bottleneck over a bridge or something like that. Leave the bridge for the heavier vehicles, you know. And then at a moment's notice, we may have 1 million of those little 4-wheel drives just ready to go. And if they're cheap enough and there's spare parts lying around everywhere, from what I understand, the bioplastics are biodegradable. So instead of just rotting away and rusting and things like that, we have things that can probably get shredded up and then put back into, either make new plastics or get put into the ground. So it's only an idea, but it's an idea that's been playing on my mind for a long time. Okay, so I'll put some photos of the Schwim Wagon in there, and obviously it doesn't have to be a Schwim Wagon, but this is just the seed. I'm planting the seed, and hopefully somebody with better brains, more money and more drive can take it from here. Okay, thank you.